quickly to go into federal settings, okay? A student who's receiving special education gets what's called a placement. The placement is supposed to describe, or the placement does describe, it is per federal law, it describes how much by percentage of their school day they can legally be pulled away from a general education classroom and into a segregated setting. A federal setting, one student is going to be 19% of the day, 20% of the day or less. It might be a kid who's pulled out a couple times a week for speech, or maybe they need a sensory break here and there, right? But mostly they're in gen ed. Then you're going to have federal setting 2, which is pulled out basically 20 to 60% of the day. Federal setting 3 is going to be 60 to 100% of the day. Federal setting 4 is going to be in a separate facility. So like a kid at Riverbend or Harrison are in a federal setting 4 placement in another district. They don't even go to the same building as non-disabled kids. And then you have some additional federal settings that have to do with hospital placement, residential facility, homebound, which is what my kid is on. He's at federal setting 8, which is the most restrictive. So what you have going on in MPS, and this is not uncommon at all, is that the way we are set up to allocate our resources to provide support for disabled students, staffing support, professional development, due process time, differentiation, whatever we need to do to support a student based on their individualized needs. The way that we as a district have solved the problem of not having special education funded is to say, we'll put all the disabled kids who have high support needs into a restrictive setting, into a segregated setting, usually federal setting 3. So that would be when a kid goes, like you said, Molly, to a DCD program, ASD or EBD. Legally, if a parent signs an IEP consenting to a federal setting 3 placement, they can be pulled out of general ed for up to 100% of their day. So that child never legally has the right to spend any time at all with their non-disabled peers. Sometimes they'll say you can visit for lunch or go to the assembly or go on this one field trip or go to morning meeting or something like that. But, you know, those kids are going to be mostly segregated. And legally, per federal law, you can't segregate a student unless you've exhausted absolutely every modification, every environmental support, every staffing solution, every curricular differentiation. Like, you really have to exhaust everything before you would be able to pull a student away, because a student is entitled to a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And least restrictive means with non-disabled peers in an integrated setting. But that's not how we do it. In Minneapolis, about 50% of the kids who have an IEP, not just kids with high support needs, 50% of kids with an IEP are in a segregated setting, pulled for more than 20% of the day. So that's very normed here. Those programs are in magnets. My child is actually enrolled in a magnet. My child's enrolled at Marcy Arts Magnet with a dual seat in their ASD program and in their he has a general education seat. So when you look at capacity and stuff like that, a seat is held there for him if he would ever spend any time in a classroom, so that he is counted in class sizes and stuff like that. But those programs are segregated settings, and it's a hard one to talk about in an intersectional way, because I can tell you myself, you have children with very high support needs. You do not have resources to serve those children inside or outside of the educational system, which means the burden falls on parents and caregivers. And it's a significant amount of work, right? We don't have any law that says a child care center has to take a disabled kid. They can refuse to take a disabled kid based on, we don't have the capacity to support a child with your child's needs, right? Like, just finding daycare can be impossible if you have a child with high support needs. So by the time your kid's going to go to kindergarten, right, if they haven't already been in a classroom-based early childhood special education, and the school says we have this program for them, it's set up perfectly for them, everybody there has training on your child's specific condition, they're going to get this really low ratio of students to staff, they're going to get a room that's completely set up for their particular sensory or behavioral needs. Everyone's been trained on all the best evidence-based strategies. They told me, your kid will get separate recess, so that if there's particular playground equipment that really helps his sensory needs, he won't have to compete with general education students to get a turn it will just be available. We take the ASD program kids out at a separate time, right? If you're not looking for it, if you're not thinking in your head, I have questions about segregating my disabled child from non-disabled kids, it sounds great. It's free. They will bus your kid. You have a whole team. You're going to get to participate if you want to in making their goals, and you get progress reports 4 times a year, and you have your IEP case manager on speed dial maybe. And you know what I mean? It sounds like I am going to get very high quality, individualized, all day free support for my kid. This is amazing. Where can I sign? And it's very predatory because you are telling parents to sign their kid into segregation without ever talking at all about the fact that statistically, once you put a kid in a segregated setting at early elementary level, that's their life. They are more likely to be in segregated settings as an adult. That means sheltered workshops instead of integrated employment. That means group housing or residential placements instead of living in their homes and communities. That means that's what's normed. And so I think about it as a parent of a white disabled kid, right, who is funneled into a segregated setting. But when you think about it for disabled kids of color who are being funneled into these segregated settings, there's like this additional layer of violence, which is the message just isn't, hey, parents, caregivers, and kids, norm that you're going to be segregated from society. It is very much, hey, parents, caregivers, kids, norm that you are not going to be in a regular classroom ever throughout your entire educational career, because there is a different place for your kid, and that place is the prison system, right? Like it dovetails very easily right into emotional behavioral disturbance classroom, right? 1 in 3 kids of color in Hennepin County have court system involvement by the time they are in high school. Like we made those kids in our schools. We created those conditions in our schools, right? So it's not an accident. And a significant portion, I think 70 or 80% of those kids in Hennepin County having court system involvement and juvenile probation involvement as minors qualify for special education services. It's like, it's really hard to even think about, you know? And it's so, like, it's all so tangled. Like, it's all so tangled up, right? Like, it's just not one problem that we solve. It's the whole, it's not an unfortunate side effect of the system. It is the system.